The iron bells of the cathedral toll a sound that carries the weight of 1,000 sins. Yet to the Duke and his secret bride, they are merely the heralds of a final, desperate hope. Behind the heavy oak doors, hidden away from the prying eyes of a court that breathes scandal and exhales betrayal, two lives are irrevocably bound by vows that carry the weight of an executioner's blade. They thought their love could exist in the quiet shadows of the sanctuary, away from the gluttonous gaze of the aristocracy, but in a kingdom built upon fragile alliances and bloody power. Secrets are a currency that eventually demands payment. As the candles flicker in the damp draught of the chapel, the chilling truth begins to surface. Some vows are written in ink, while others are inscribed in the very blood that will soon stain the altar floor. If you find yourself drawn to the dark, forgotten corners of history where love and tragedy collide, consider joining this journey by subscribing, as we unravel the haunting legacy of the union that brought a dynasty to its knees. The air inside the Duke's private chapel is heavy with the scent of aged beeswax and the relentless, creeping damp of the surrounding stone, a space where time itself seems to hold its breath in anticipation of a tragedy. Here, amidst the flickering shadows that dance like ghosts against the unyielding masonry, two souls stand at the very precipice of a future they are forbidden to claim. The Duke, a man whose hands have shaped the fate of the province, now finds them trembling as he reaches out to take the hand of his beloved. A woman whose name is whispered only in the hushed, frightened tones of servants who fear the consequences of knowing too much. It is a desperate, frantic sort of devotion, born not of the patient growth of affection but of the terrifying knowledge that each moment they steal together is a moment closer to the inevitable discovery that will shatter their fragile peace forever. Every creak of the floorboards outside the sanctuary door sounds like a thunderclap in the stillness, sending a shiver of dread down their spines as they cling to one another. There is no sunlight in this hidden place, only the dying orange glow of embers that struggle against the encroaching dark, reflecting off the cold, hard surfaces of the stone altar where they intend to bind their lives together. Their voices are barely audible, hushed to a whisper to protect them from the ears of the palace spies who act as the eyes and teeth of the realm, ensuring that no secret remains buried for long. In the dim light, their faces are masks of intense, agonizing concentration, focused entirely on the exchange of vows that hold the power to either save them or sign their collective death warrants. They are acutely aware of the machinery of the court, a beast that never sleeps and is constantly hungry for the ruin of those who dare to act outside the rigid confines of their station. Each word spoken is an act of defiance against a world that demands their total obedience. A world that would see them torn asunder before it would allow a duke to prioritize his heart over the demands of his dynasty. The weight of the crown he serves feels physically heavier in this moment, a crushing burden that stands in direct opposition to the freedom he seeks in these dark, damp shadows. Outside, the kingdom continues its rhythmic march of duty and tradition, blissfully unaware of the mutiny unfolding in the chapel, yet the Duke feels the oppressive gaze of his peers and rivals. Even through the thick stone walls, the gravity of their situation is not lost on the woman, who knows that her life in this court has always been a precarious walk upon a razor's edge. She watches the flicker of torchlight play across the Duke's features, seeing the exhaustion and the hidden, simmering rage he feels toward the very institution he is expected to uphold. She understands that by accepting his hand, she is not merely becoming a duchess in the eyes of a secret god. She is effectively volunteering to be the target of every rival who has ever felt slighted by his rise to power. Her gown, though made of the finest silks, feels like a shroud in the damp air. A beautiful trapping that will eventually be used to label her a harlot or a political pawn once the truth is inevitably dragged into the light. There is a grim poetry to their plight, a realization that they have become protagonists in their own tragedy long before the curtain has even begun to fall. They exchange silver rings, cold and unadorned, hidden symbols of a contract that the world would deem illegitimate and treasonous. Each breath they draw feels stolen from the lungs of the court, a minor theft that they hope will go unnoticed until the very last second. Yet, deep in her heart, she hears the faint, rhythmic drumming of the executioner's steps. A phantom sound that warns her that this sanctuary is merely a tomb waiting to be sealed. Despite the crushing atmosphere, they find a moment of fragile connection. A brief stillness where the chaos of their lives fades into the background. In that fleeting second, the Duke forgets the political machinations. And she forgets the social ruin that awaits them. They are simply two people trying to carve a sliver of humanity out of a world that values only gold, land, and bloodline. It is a dangerous, intoxicating indulgence, one that blinds them to the shadows lengthening behind the altar, the shadows of those who have been watching, waiting, and recording every whispered oath. They have committed the ultimate crime of the nobility. They have dared to place their own happiness above the cold, ironclad requirements of the state, and for that, the price will be far higher than either of them could ever imagine. The Duke pulls her closer, his touch light but desperate, as if he could shield her from the coming storm simply by holding her within the sanctuary's cold embrace. He knows the risks, yet the pull of this union is a force more primal than the politics of the realm. A gravity that threatens to pull his entire house down into the mire of scandal. She looks into his eyes, searching for the strength to endure what must follow. And finds only a reflection of her own fear, magnified by the stakes of their defiance. The silence of the chapel deepens, heavy and suffocating, as they realize that the doors they have closed behind them are the only thing separating them from a world that will never allow them to exist as one. They have sealed their fate, not with a public proclamation, but with a quiet, private betrayal of everything they were born to serve. While the Duke believes his secret is safely locked behind the heavy velvet curtains of his private chapel, the machinery of the court is already turning with cold, calculating precision against him. Every whispered conversation in the dimly lit corridors and every knowing glance shared over silver goblets serves to peel away the layers of his deception, exposing his vulnerabilities to those who hunger for his downfall. The court is a living, breathing entity that feeds on the reputations of its inhabitants. And the Duke's sudden withdrawal from public life has not gone unnoticed. His absence from the king's side during the evening hunt, usually an opportunity to showcase his loyalty and influence, has been interpreted as a dangerous divergence, a sign that his attention is drifting toward forbidden horizons. In the shadows of the great hall, advisors and hangers-on watch him with eyes like hungry crows. They do not need proof to dismantle a man, they only need a thread of suspicion. They begin to cross-reference his whereabouts, noting the inconsistencies in his reports and the strange, uncharacteristic secrecy surrounding his travel. Every time he lingers too long in the chapel or emerges with the dust of the sanctuary on his sleeves, a new rumor is born, gaining momentum as it passes from mouth to mouth. The betrayal is not merely an act of malice by a single enemy. It is a strategic, collective dismantling of his influence, carried out by those who view his love as a fatal weakness that can be exploited for their own advancement. They understand that to break the Duke, they do not need to attack him directly, they only need to isolate him from the king's favor. The chief architect of this shadow war is Lord Vane, a man whose family has spent generations waiting for the Duke's house to falter. Vane does not work with daggers, but with ledger books and informants. He has assigned two of his most trusted servants to pose as cleaning staff within the chapel's wing. They are ghost-like figures, silent and observant, tasked with recording the exact times the Duke enters the sanctuary and the length of his stay. They have already found the discarded fragments of a silk ribbon left near the altar. A piece of evidence that screams of feminine presence in a space that should be reserved for the Duke's solitary prayer. Vane holds this piece of silk like a prize, knowing that it is the key that will eventually unlock the door to the Duke's ruin. As the days turn into weeks, the tension in the court reaches a fever pitch. The Duke feels the eyes upon him, yet he is too blinded by his own sense of security to realize how far the net has already been cast. He moves with a false confidence, unaware that his every gesture is being documented and analyzed by those who would see him erased. His failure to see the threat is a symptom of his love, a distraction that has made him careless in a world that thrives on hypervigilance. While he focuses on the next time he can see his bride, his enemies are focused on the final blow that will ensure he never sees another dawn as a man of status. The betrayal is meticulously crafted to ensure that when the mask is finally torn away, the scandal will be too great for even the king to ignore. They are orchestrating a narrative that portrays the Duke not as a man in love, but as a traitor consorting with an enemy of the crown. By twisting the timeline of his private meetings, they can make it appear as though he is facilitating a conspiracy against the throne, using the chapel as a meeting ground for spies. It is a brilliant, vicious deception that turns his most sacred moment into the catalyst for his destruction. As the trap closes, the Duke remains oblivious, planning his next clandestine meeting, unaware that he is already walking toward the center of a pre-arranged execution. As the inevitable dawn of the public unveiling approaches, the sanctity of the Duke's private chapel is violated by the harsh, unyielding reality of the court's judgment. The illusion that their love could ever be insulated from the voracious appetite of the nobility for scandal is shattered in a single, brutal moment. It begins with the heavy thud of soldiers' boots against the chapel floor, a sound that echoes with the finality of a tomb closing. The doors, once a bastion of their fragile intimacy, are kicked open, and the flickering candlelight is instantly overwhelmed by the cold, harsh glare of the guards' lanterns. There is no time for protest, no opportunity to explain. The Duke and his bride are surrounded before they can even stand, their private sanctuary transformed into a staging ground for their own public disgrace. The confrontation that follows is not a debate, but a systematic, calculated humiliation. Lord Vane enters the chapel with a slow, predatory grace, holding the silk ribbon found earlier like a trophy of war. He does not speak of love or romance, he speaks only of treason, of clandestine meetings, and of the Duke's supposed conspiracy to undermine the crown. Each word is a sharpened blade, intended not just to wound, but to ensure that the Duke's reputation is irrevocably carved away. The bride is dragged from the altar, her pleas for mercy drowned out by the mocking laughter of the court observers who have gathered to witness the fall of a man they once feared. This is a spectacle designed to show everyone what happens when a noble dares to place his own desires above the iron-clad expectations of the ruling class. The ruin of their union is absolute, executed with a clinical precision that leaves nothing behind but the ashes of their former lives. The Duke is stripped of his signet ring, the symbol of his authority, while his bride is forced to watch as their few, precious belongings, the letters, the tokens, the very altar where they swore their vows, are smashed into dust. It is a display of calculated cruelty, a message sent to every other member of the court that the individual is nothing, and the state is everything. They are torn apart, forced into separate cells in the freezing, lightless depths of the palace dungeons, where the only sound is the rhythmic dripping of water and the distant, mocking toll of the cathedral bells. The chapel, once their only refuge, is boarded up, marked with the king's seal, and left to rot as a monument to their catastrophic folly. In the darkness of his cell, the Duke realizes the full extent of the betrayal, not just by Lord Vane, but by the very system he had spent his life protecting. He had believed that his title and his service would offer him a degree of immunity, a shield against the petty machinations of his rivals. Now, he sees the truth. In the eyes of the court, he was never a man, but merely a component in a machine that requires absolute, unthinking compliance. Every sacrifice he had ever made, every battle he had fought on behalf of the crown, meant nothing the moment he decided to prioritize his own heart. The betrayal of his station was not the crime was in believing that he was allowed to have a heart at all. He sits in the cold, listening for any sign of her, but the palace is silent, its cold, stone heart showing no remorse for the lives it has just extinguished. The collapse of the Duke's household sends a violent tremor through the aristocracy, acting as a grim catalyst that permanently alters the delicate balance of power within the kingdom. It is a cautionary tale that will be whispered in the shadowed alcoves of the palace for generations. A chilling warning to others of the devastating cost of prioritizing personal desire over the rigid, unforgiving demands of the crown. The tragedy is woven into the very fabric of the court's history, becoming a phantom that haunts the long, drafty halls where the Duke's influence once stood as an unassailable bastion of authority. Nobles who once courted his favor now scramble to distance themselves, scrubbing their ledgers and burning their correspondence, fearful that the Duke's contagion of treason might somehow stain their own meticulously crafted reputations. The fallout is swift and absolute. The king, eager to demonstrate his unwavering control, orders the public dismantling of the Duke's estates, turning his ancestral home into a hollow shell of its former glory. Fields are left to lie fallow, servants are cast into the streets without coin or recommendation, and the very memory of the Duke is subjected to a state-mandated erasure. It is as if the man himself never existed, his portrait removed from the gallery and his name struck from the official registers of the peerage. The court watches this destruction with a mixture of terror and dark satisfaction. They have witnessed the state's capacity for total annihilation, a lesson that ensures the continued submission of every lord, lady, and knight in the realm. Yet, in the quiet, desperate moments of the night, the story refuses to die completely. The tale of the Duke and his bride transcends the political reality, morphing into a potent myth that circulates among the common people who work the Duke's former lands. They speak of the chapel where the lovers stood, claiming that on the anniversary of their arrest, the smell of beeswax and the faint sound of whispered vows drift through the ruins. This legend becomes a beacon of resistance, a silent acknowledgement that even in a world ruled by steel and mandate, there are forces, like love and defiance, that the crown cannot fully suppress. It is a haunting, spectral reminder that beneath the veneer of noble duty, the human spirit is always searching for a way to break the chains. As the years pass, the Duke's downfall is studied by the next generation of power brokers not as a tragedy, but as a masterclass in political survival. They analyze the move made by Lord Vane, noting the efficiency of his deception and the psychological mastery required to turn a man's virtues against him. The Duke's legacy is reduced to a set of tactical errors, a cold, clinical autopsy of a life that was discarded for the sake of the status quo. The romance that once burned so brightly is forgotten, replaced by the dry, sterile records of a treason trial that ultimately served only to consolidate the power of those who remained. The tragedy is not just the loss of two lives, but the final, suffocating triumph of the system over the individual. Centuries later, the story of the Duke and his bride remains a testament to the inescapable tragedy of those who attempt to rewrite the rules of their own existence within a world governed by iron and blood. Historians look back at the scattered remnants of their life, a corroded signet ring, a singed fragment of a letter, the cold, moss-covered stones of a long, abandoned altar, and see not just a narrative of ill-fated love, but a haunting study in the destructive nature of absolute power and the total, systematic erasure of the individual by the state. Their ruin was not an accidental collision of fate, but the inevitable, calculated outcome of a machine that demands total, unthinking subservience from its components. It serves as a stark, chilling reminder that in the eyes of the realm, even the most influential figures are ultimately disposable, their lives easily discarded the moment they cease to function as the state dictates. The legend of the chapel has largely faded, worn thin by the relentless erosion of time. Yet the moral of their demise remains embedded in the dark soil of the kingdom's history. It is a story that reveals the fragile boundary between glory and infamy, proving that one can rise to the heights of ducal power in the morning only to be erased from the records by nightfall. The tragedy lies in the completeness of their destruction. They left no heirs, no lineage, and no monuments, leaving behind only a spectral, lingering shadow that serves as a grim warning to those who dare to seek meaning outside the gilded cages of their birth. They were simply two souls who dared to believe their love was stronger than the iron mandate of the crown. A miscalculation that cost them everything, including their place in the memory of the world. As we peer through the fog of the past, the Duke and his bride appear not as heroes of a romance, but as tragic prisoners of a system that thrived on their suffering. Their lives were consumed by a fire of their own making, a blaze that provided a moment of warmth in a cold, indifferent court before turning them into pillars of ash. In the final analysis, their story is a mirror held up to the human condition, reflecting our innate, dangerous yearning for autonomy in a world that is fundamentally designed to crush it. They remain, in death as in life, a silent testament to the enduring reality that in the game of kings, the heart is the most dangerous card to play, and the one that almost always leads to the deepest, most permanent darkness.